All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to talk about a system that honestly shapes our world more than any government, more than any army, but most of us never really see it. We're talking about the invisible financial system.
That's a pretty bold way to kick things off, isn't it? But it really gets to the core of what we're exploring. See, this isn't a system that rules with kings or armies. Its power comes from contracts, from credit, and, well, from our own quiet participation. You know, we're all taught that money is just a tool. It's simple, it's neutral, it's just for trading stuff. But what if that's not the whole story? In this explainer, we're going to trace the history of an idea. The idea that money was actually engineered not just to measure value, but to extract it. So to really get how the system works today, we need to go back. We're going to walk through 5 key stages. We'll start with the illusion of money, then see how abstract wealth was invented, how that became the engine of empire, then a global operating system, and finally what it all means for us living inside the system right now.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. To understand our modern, kind of abstract system, we first have to imagine a time when money was something you could actually hold in your hand, something that felt, real.
For most of human history, this is what wealth was. It was actual, tangible stuff. Gold, silver, salt, even grain. You could touch it, you could store it, you could see it right there. Its value was pretty straightforward. It was based on physical scarcity. If you wanted more, you had 3 options: find it, grow it, or take it. It was limited by the real world.
And this slide right here shows the shift that changed absolutely everything. We went from a system based on physical matter to one based entirely on belief. The big idea was, what if money doesn't have to physically exist, as long as everyone just agrees that it does? That one question, that single idea, became the foundation for a totally new kind of power. So how do we get from gold coins to numbers on a screen? Let's jump into section 2. We're going to see exactly how a few clever merchants and bankers pulled off this great separation of money from matter, inventing the whole concept of abstract wealth. Now, this didn't happen overnight. The first really big experiment was way back in 11th century China, where the government started issuing paper notes, mostly just because it was practical. Then, centuries later, Italian merchants came up with letters of credit to avoid having to ship chests of gold around. And by the 15th century, you had banks like the Medici in Florence who weren't just financing trade, they were financing popes and kings. They became the new financial heart of Europe. And this leads us to an invention that sounds incredibly boring, but I promise you, it's one of the most powerful tools ever created: double entry bookkeeping. I know it sounds dull, but it was completely revolutionary because it allowed banks to stop just recording value and to start manufacturing it. So how did it work? It's almost deceptively simple. When a bank gives out a loan, that loan, which is somebody else's debt, gets recorded on the bank's books as an asset. Right there in that moment, with just a couple of pen strokes, new money just entered the system. Debt itself became a new kind of wealth. And that's the core of the whole modern illusion. All right, moving on to section 3. So you've got this incredible new financial technology. The next step? Scaling it up. We're going to see how these tools went from powering city-states to building global empires, becoming a true engine for expansion. The next massive innovation was the joint stock company. By selling shares to the public, companies like the Dutch East India Company could raise just enormous amounts of money. I mean, they got so rich they were wealthier than entire kingdoms. The line between a corporation and a state started to get really, really blurry. It was a huge shift. England saw what the Dutch were doing and basically took it to the next level. The British East India Company wasn't just a business, it was practically a parallel government. It had its own armies, it collected its own taxes, and it ruled over huge territories. And in doing so, it turned London into the absolute center of global finance. But the real masterstroke, the financial checkmate, came in 1694 when the Bank of England was created. This move locked in a concept that is truly mind-bending, a brilliant paradox that would fuel the British Empire for the next couple of centuries. Here's how the machine worked. The British government was basically broke from all its wars. So, a group of private bankers makes them a deal. They'll loan the government money, but in return, they get the exclusive right to issue paper currency. Now here's the kicker. These new banknotes weren't backed by gold. They were backed by the government's own debt. So, debt wasn't a problem anymore. It was the raw material you needed to create more money. It became the engine of empire. And that brings us to the 20th century. In this section, we'll see how this whole system, born in Europe, gets formalized and expanded into the global financial operating system that we all live in today. 3 key dates really locked everything into place. First, in 1913, the Federal Reserve is created, handing the power to issue America's money to a consortium of private banks. Then, in 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement makes the US dollar the world's reserve currency. And the final piece of the puzzle, in 1971, President Nixon cuts the dollar's last tie to gold. From that point on, it's a currency based purely on faith.
And that's what brings us to the age of fiat money. Fiat is just Latin for let it be done. The value of our money today comes from a decree, a government command. It's backed by nothing tangible, just our collective trust. With this final step, money became pure abstraction, and the power behind it became almost completely invisible.
Now here's the crucial thing to understand about all this. It creates what you might call a system trap. It's a structure so huge, so ingrained, that it doesn't need a conspiracy or a secret group of people pulling strings. It just needs all of us to keep participating. Every time we take out a mortgage, get a paycheck, swipe a credit card, we're feeding the system that runs on this ever-expanding cycle of debt. So why does any of this history matter? Well, in our final section, let's connect all these dots directly to our daily lives and really look at the consequences of living inside this system.
Let's just take inflation. The official story we usually hear is that it's just a random, unfortunate side effect of a growing economy. But if you look at it through the lens of this system, you could argue it's actually a core feature of the design. It works like a quiet tax, slowly eating away at the value of your savings and your work. It's a way for massive debts to be inflated away. And it makes sure that saving money is punished while taking on debt is rewarded. It keeps the whole machine going.
The 2008 financial crisis showed us this in plain sight. When the whole system was on the brink of collapse, trillions of new dollars were created, seemingly out of thin air. But that money wasn't mainly for the people who lost their homes. No, it was to bail out the very institutions that caused the problem in the first place. The risk was basically moved from private banks onto all of us, the public. And this system is always evolving. The next big step on the horizon seems to be central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The promise, the sales pitch, is all about efficiency, convenience, faster payments. But the peril, as many critics point out, is the potential end of financial privacy. We'd be talking about programmable money, money that could theoretically be frozen or redirected or even just deleted. It could make our financial freedom conditional. Which, of course, leads to the biggest question of all. If we're living inside this trap, how do you get out? Well, the answer probably isn't to try and fight the system head on. It's too big. The idea is to outgrow it. And you do that by building real value in the things the system can't just print more of. Knowledge, skills, strong communities, real relationships. The more real assets you have, the less control the abstract system has over you. Because the one currency that can never, ever be devalued is awareness.